we've been learning Josephus and his life, and we all know the end of the story is the destruction of Israel and the loss of sovereignty of 2,000 years that came at the hands of the Romans. But that loss of sovereignty is over. And 40 years ago, Jews, Israelis, began to resettle the heartland of their country. And this is a time to celebrate. So I'm going to make a plug for a very important event in Toronto. It's called, it's a 40-year celebration of the resettlement of Judea and Samaria. Right? And the note in it says that, witness the rise of Jewish life and culture on the land at the cradle of Jewish civilization. So as we learn Josephus, we're actually learning about the loss of this land that is now being recovered, one step at a time, with growth. So Sunday, November 29th, the last Sunday in November, at 7 p.m., at the Shari Shamayim Synagogue at 470 Glencairn Avenue in Toronto, is going to be a gathering in celebration of this event. Tickets will be available at the door, and I urge you, if you're not in Israel, if you're in Israel, you're excused. But if you're not in Israel, I urge you to be at this event. We will be out of town, but are returning, God willing, in time for this event as well. And I hope you'll bring as many of your friends as you can. It'll be a very special night with very special guests who are essential to this rebirth of the cradle of Israel. So with that thought, we'll return to Josephus. Now, if you remember, Josephus had routed his enemies, his Jewish enemies. On one side of him he had Roman forces that were kind of jousting with him but not really attacking him. But Jerusalem had sent an army to march against him, and through a whole series of really brilliant tactical maneuvers, he was able to rout his enemies without actually having to go to war with them, although their intent was to go to war with him and kill him. But when confronted with overwhelming odds of the Galileans, they realized that discretion was the better part of valor, and they retreated to Tiberias. And that's where our story picks up. Right? So Jonathan's group, which is the group of those sent from Jerusalem to destroy Josephus, had arrived among the Tiberians and persuaded many who were at odds with me to rebel when they heard about my coming. This is like a constant thing for those who have not heard before, is that very often people are speaking about Josephus in very negative terms, because for many different reasons. There's a lot of jealousies directed towards him. Now remember, this is Josephus speaking to us himself, so you have to weigh that in the discussion. However, when they heard about my coming, they became anxious for themselves, and they came to me, greeting me, and began to say that they considered it fortunate that I was thus involved in the Galilee. And indeed they rejoiced together with me at the honor in which I was held. For they claimed my reputation made them look good. These are the Tiberians. Tiberians were about to throw in their lot with the enemies of Josephus until Josephus showed up. And now they're saying, that you have made us look good. Why? Right? Since they had been my teachers. They viewed themselves as my teachers, and they were currently my fellow citizens. In fact, they kept saying that my friendship was more appropriate to them than Jonathan's, though eager to depart from home, Jerusalem, they would wait patiently there until they should place Jonathan at my mercy. While saying these things, they swore in confirmation the most dreadful oaths that we have, on account of which I considered it improper to mistrust them. Now remember, Jews don't swear, right? And there are many cases in a Beis Din where Reuben claims that Shmuel didn't give him the money he was supposed to and should give him the 100 shekels. And the Beis Din turns to Reuben and says, if that is true, swear that he gave you the 100 shekels. And even if it's true that he gave him the 100 shekels, Reuben won't swear. He won't swear. And he'll lose the 100 shekels as a result of it. Because we're very loath to swear for many reasons. I won't go into all the reasons for it. But as we know that when we're in front of a court, in fact, even in an induction into the Jewish army, the Israeli army, the IDF, those people who are religious are instructed by their officers and by their rabbis, the unit's rabbis, not to swear, but to affirm their determination to serve. Right? Whereas those who are not religious tend to swear. Right?
You confirm it from the...
I confirmed it from Rav Rimon, Josephus Rimon, who paskins for the army last week. Right? We had this conversation. So even in such a serious moment, we don't swear. These people were swearing dreadful oaths, over my whatever, that we have on account that it was considered improper. So consequently, I understood that they had basically made tshuva, he's telling us. So I wouldn't mistrust them.
Those who were coming to get him now had changed sides,
and they were swearing using God's holy name.
So the people they were changing sides.
So it would seem.
What about not the leadership though?
It seems even the leadership, but certainly the support staff, definitely. Mm-hmm. Indeed, on account of this, on account of the fact that they swore them, and I would not mistrust them, on the next day being Shabbos, the Sabbath, they appealed to me to make my lodging elsewhere. They asserted that the city of Tiberias ought not to be burdened. That is to say, he's traveling with a lot of troops, right? And troops are not always as civil as the regular citizens of a city are. And they're saying it would be better if you lodged your army outside of Tiberias, right? So I departed for Terichea, which is about, actually let me just double check it. Here it says, it's just a few kilometers away. I think it's 6 kilometers away. So I departed for Terichea, having suspected nothing, but all the same, having left behind in the city those who would pass along anything that they might say about us. Mm-hmm. So this is very Josephus. Mm-hmm. I trusted them completely, but I left behind trusted people who would report to me anything that was said that maybe I shouldn't have trusted them about. But more than that, all along the entire road from Terichea to Tiberias, I set up many others so that they could signal me via relay about whatever was left behind in the city that might be discovered. So now you see you have a problem because it's Shabbos, right? And even though he trusts them completely, he wants to know what's going on. So how far can a person walk? Right? Mm-hmm. There's a limit. 2,000 thum, right? Before you're 2,000 steps. Basically before
get communication because they have to walk 2,000 outside city limits. But he wasn't.
Rally.
Unless there's little towns in between there, less than 2,000.
But even if there aren't. But even if there are not. If you're sleeping Friday night on the road and your friend is sleeping 1,500 cubits away, you can go and deliver your message to your friend.
And then he can get up and go next.
Another 1,500. Exactly. Out, right? So that's exactly what he did. He said all along the way, he set up a relay, right?
Chain.
Right. So that about whatever those left behind in the city might discover, right? So if his spies had a message to send him, right? They could send them this without violating Shabbos. That's what he's saying. On the following day, then, everyone came together into the prayer house. Now he's reporting to us the information because he's not there, right? Mm-hmm. So he's saying, on Saturday morning, everybody came together in the prayer house. Now, it's an interesting phrase. This is a Greek word that he uses here, prayer house, meaning it's a gathering of the community for the purpose of prayer. So it's not actually necessarily a synagogue, right? As I say, they came to a central building. You know, they went to, the Rogers Stadium. But their purpose was to pray, right? It's a meeting place. And there's a whole question about, at this point in history, later on there are many early synagogues that existed in the Galilee that have been uncovered.
There might not have been as many,
but not this far back. It seems not this far back. The ones that have been covered are there, and that, but there are kind of rectangular gathering buildings, which were also part of Greek and Roman tradition, places where the crowds could gather. And this seems to be a combination of the two phrases. That is to say, it's a gathering place. But they were gathering when? On Shabbos. Why? For the purpose of prayer, right? Now, it may have also been a synagogue. This is very unclear. But it's not necessarily a synagogue, which is what you might assume at this point. Right?
Is a synagogue Greek word itself?
What?
Is a synagogue a Greek word itself?
Yes, it is. It is.
I thought church was Greek.
Yeah. So the following day, when everyone came together to the prayer house, the largest building and able to accommodate a large crowd, when Jonathan went in, although he did not dare to speak openly of defection, he did say that their city was in need of a better general. This is what, between Shachris and Musaf? It's by the way, it's before Kiddush.
Planning to see this edition already.
But somehow he managed to get this into the conversation. The council president, Jesus, holding back, not the same Jesus as the one that's famous, holding back nothing, said plenty. It's preferable, citizens, for us to submit to 4 men rather than 1, especially those who are so brilliant with respect to ancestry and so renowned with respect to insight. Now, for those who are new to this, the leaders of the rebellion sent from Jerusalem were 4 men. Remember, we had the discussion earlier. If the person is a Kohen, then we have a Kohen. And if the person is from a famous family, then we have someone from a famous family. So they had 4 very distinguished leaders of this army that marched out of Jerusalem to force an abdication of Josephus, right? So here, Jesus is saying, it would be preferable to have a council of 4 men, of great and distinguished background, respect to their ancestry, and so renowned with respect and insight. He's only talking about a specific 4 men. He indicated that Jonathan's group, now Justice, came forward, and he praised Jesus, who had said these things. Accordingly, he persuaded some of the population. So now we have, once again, it's kind of a Mark Antony environment, right? I didn't come to praise Caesar, I came to bury him, right? And these are all honorable men. But the mob was not pleased with what was said. They would surely have proceeded to riot if the meeting had not dissolved at the arrival of the 6th hour, at which time it is lawful for us to take our luncheon on Shabbos. Ion's group, unsuccessful, having held over the council until the following day. Now this is so interesting because this is Josephus describing something which is deeply ingrained in Jewish law, right? The Jewish day is divided into 2 parts, right? And of course, right now, actually, we're in the middle of a very interesting time because it's in the middle of the winter. But the daylight hours are divided by 12, and the dark hours are divided by 12. Right? So that means, by the way, that an hour is not necessarily 60 minutes, a Talmudic hour, right? The first 6 hours are from dawn till halfway through daylight hours. And the second 6 hours are from the height of the center of the day until the end of the sunlight. Now, it is forbidden, right, to fast on Shabbos, right? You're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. And so the definition of fasting, in this case, is not eating for the first half of the day. That's our halacha. Mm-hmm. The first 6 hours. Now, many years ago, I was davening at a Hasidic shul, and I was expected at lunch at a Sephardi family. And the Sephardi family said, you have to be here by this time. And it was a very polite, very pleasant rabbi who was asking me to come. And I said, gee, I don't know when the Hasidim will finish eating. Now, the Hasidim
finish davening.
Finish davening, right? Now, many Hasidim actually have a little something to eat before davening on Shabbos. And one of the reasons is they don't want to fast all day, right? Or half the day. I said, gee, I can't leave during davening. And he said, we can't wait for you, right? And I didn't know this halacha at the time, but then later I realized that, my host, who was a tremendously hospitable and nice man, was caught between this bind of, gee, my guest is not going to be there when I say Kiddush, or I'm going to violate a halacha, right? Which he had kept all his life, right? And he didn't want to put enough pressure on me to explain that to me at the time, right? Because it might mean that I'm leaving davening too early. This is actually what Josephus is talking about right here. He said, we're permitted to have luncheon at the 6th hour. In fact, it was almost the opposite. They must eat by the 6th hour, or they would be fasting, right? And they can't do that on Shabbos. So this whole thing broke up. The potential riot broke up.
Because of Kiddush?
Because, well, yeah, Kiddush. But more than Kiddush, right? Are you going to fast on Shabbos, right? And both sides of this debate were not going to fast on Shabbos. They understood it. So ended the riot, right? In time that they should eat by the 6th hour. When these things were immediately reported to me, he goes on now. And he says, so everything broke up. The group was unsuccessful at trying to accuse me, but they held it over to the next day. They're going to continue this conversation Saturday night or Sunday morning. When these things were immediately reported to me, he had almost the internet, I determined to go early the next day to the city of Tiberias. I'm going to return, show my face. On the following day, I came at about the 1st hour, at dawn, right, from Tiberias, and on my arrival, found the mob already gathering in the prayer house. Why there was even a meeting, those who were assembled did not know. Why there was a meeting, those that were assembled did not know. Like, they were just told to gather there. They didn't really know what it was. Now the group, when they had unexpectedly observed me present, were quite disturbed. At that, they schemed to disseminate the word that the Roman cavalry were near, on the frontier some 30 stadia away. A stadia is, let me see, hang on.
Sounds very Roman.
I think it's like a furlong.
It's about 3.75 miles, 6 kilometers.
Oh.
Right, they're about 6 kilometers away.
Oh.
Right. Now remember, we know about these Romans because originally Josephus said, I can't come to you when they asked him to come to him. I can't come to you because I'm doing my duty as a general. I'm fighting the Romans, right? He wasn't really fighting them. They were just skirmishes where they would kind of ride close to each other, fire some arrows, nobody was getting wounded, and then they would go in different directions because the Romans had, I think, 2 cohorts, a total of 1,000 men, 500 of them were cavalry, and Josephus had 8,000 armed men. So the Romans didn't really want to have a clash with him at this point. They were kind of just testing a little bit. So what happened? The group, that when they saw that I had arrived, right, at that they schemed to disseminate the word that Roman cavalry were near, on the frontier some 6 kilometers away from the city. They had been discovered at a place called Hamonia. When these things were announced as a result of staging, Ionis group kept appealing to me not to stand watching their land being plundered by the enemy. They said these things with this in mind, occupying me on the pretext of a call for urgent help. They themselves would set out changing things to establish that the city was hostile to me. So they're trying to get him to, he's a general, the Romans are attacking, right? Why are you sitting here getting to debate with us? Do what generals do. Go fight the Romans.
Trying to diminish him
right?
inside of the people.
Yeah, why are you sitting on your behind when the Romans are attacking our outskirts? Go and deal with them. You're the general, right? So even though I fully understood their design, he knew that there were no Romans. He knew exactly where the Romans were. I nevertheless complied so that I would not create the impression before the Tiberians of failing to provide for this security. So I went out, and when upon arriving at the place I found no trace of the enemy, I returned taking a shortcut. So he went out one way, and he came back the fast route, right? They saw him going out the long way, but he kind of must have surprised them if he said I took a shortcut back. Now, he's telling us something very interesting about himself. He was sitting there knowing that the Romans weren't there. But Josephus holds his cards very tight to his chest, right? And he doesn't say, come on, I know that you guys don't know what you're talking about. There are no Romans there, I'm not worried about it. He plays their game. But he outplays their game. Upon arrival, I found the whole council already assembling along with the crowd of citizens. Jonathan's group was fabricating a rich accusation against me as one who, while carelessly making light of the costs of war for them, was leading a life of luxury. While saying these things, they produced 4 letters, as if written to them by those on the frontier of the Galilee, appealing to them to come and help, for a force of Roman cavalry and so infantry was about to plunder their territory on the 3rd day, and begging them to hurry there, not to stand by watching. When the Tiberians heard these things, thinking them to be true, they kept making outcries, saying, I should not be sitting down there, but should go off and give the military assistance to their fellow nationals. Now, what do you think he did?
He said, I'm going. I'm coming back very fast.
Right? So that's what you think. He said, I'm going. Because that's what he did before. Yeah. Right?
No?
Yeah. In response, because I perceived their plan, I said that I would readily comply and announced I would rush to battle without delay. All the same, I counseled that since the document signaled that the Romans would strike at 4 locations, they should divide the force into 5 units and appoint Ionis's group, his companions. Remember, there were 4 of them, 4 leaders, right? And his companions over each of them. It was fitting for good men not only to counsel, I said, but in case of pressing need, to lead the way in providing help. For I myself would not be able to lead off more than 1 unit. My counsel was extremely congenial to the mob, and so they compelled those followers to make off for battle. The latter suffered extreme embarrassment when their intentions proved ineffective, when the things plotted by me outmaneuvered their undertakings. So he said, you're right. We're in a very dangerous situation. I'm leaving immediately. Wait a second. Before I leave, I can only deal with 1 Roman attack. There happens to be 4 more of you. Well, take your armies, each one of you, leave Tiberias, and go and deal with the enemy. obviously we have a very serious enemy because your letters say we have a very serious enemy here, right? Now a certain one of them, named Ananias, a vile and wretched man, proposed publicly to the masses that a fast day before God be appointed for the following day. Right? They're fasting before battle, which was this happens many times in Jewish traditions. Maybe it's most famous in the Persian story, where Esther says fast for 3 days before. He directed that having disarmed themselves at about the same time and in the same place, they should appear openly before God. For they understood that if they should not receive assistance from God, all weaponry would be useless. Yet, he was saying these things not out of piety, but for the purpose of taking me and my people unarmed. And indeed, I complied out of necessity, so that I should not appear to disdain this admonition concerning piety. So as soon as we had withdrawn to our own places, Iona's group wrote to Iones, instructing him to come to them immediately. This is John of Gascala saying to come, right? To come to him early the next day with as many soldiers as possible. This is on the fast day. He could immediately have me at his mercy and do whatever he had prayed for.
He'd be weak,
right?
From fasting.
Yeah. That's right. So Josephus' enemy we're aware of is one of the leaders of the Sicarii, of the Zealots, John of Gascala, right? And he's been terribly embarrassed and failed in a couple of attempts to get Josephus. So now his colleagues are here saying, okay, they're fasting and they're disarmed. Come immediately, and whatever it is you've been praying for, your prayers are about to be answered. On the following day, then, I directed 2 bodyguards with me, who are most esteemed with respect to courage and proven with respect to loyalty, to conceal daggers under their clothes, so that if there should be an attack by our adversaries, we might have the means of defense, and to go forward with me. I myself took an armored vest and strapped a sword underneath, but in such a way that it was inconspicuous. And I went into the prayer house. So he's going into shul armed, really to the teeth, but in an inconspicuous way. Now the council president, Jesus, for he had posted himself at the doors, gave instructions that all the men who were with me should be kept out. He allowed only me and my friends to enter. Just when we were performing our lawful duties, directing ourselves to prayer, Jesus stood up and began interrogating me about furnishings and the uncoined silver that had been taken from the burning of the royal palace. This was an episode that happened previously. With whom do they happen to be left? He was saying these things because he wanted to occupy the time while Jonathan of Gascala came along. For my part, I declared that Capella and 10 principal men of the Tiberians had everything. Go question them, I declared. I'm not lying. When they said that indeed the goods were with them, he said, and the 20 gold pieces that you received when you sold a certain stash of uncoined silver, what became of that? I declared that these had been given as travel money to their envoys. Right now, remember what happened. If you remember, the envoys were sent back to Jerusalem with a bodyguard of 100 of Josephus' most trusted elders, right? Because now they're going back to find out what does the public in Jerusalem think of Josephus. Because the plot against Josephus was hatched by the way, somebody very famous, Shimon ben Gamliel. Right, according to Josephus, it was hatched by him. He was the Nasi at the time. And 4 other people, really an executive committee of those who ran Jerusalem, without having spoken to the whole Sanhedrin, the elders of the community. So now, having been terribly embarrassed, this force being sent, they were now sent back. And they were sent back with the news that the Tiberians are loyal to Josephus. Everything you heard was not true. And we're requiring you to bring the matter before the people of Jerusalem, and we will return with your position to the Galilee. And if your position is really to remove Josephus, Josephus will step down. But if it is to support Josephus, so be it. Now, just to make clear how serious this was, Josephus sent 100 of his best men. They combined very strong soldiers with very wise men who would impress the people of Jerusalem with the maturity in their opinions. But it was also a very powerful force to return with. You know, where are the thousands we sent out? What came back was 10 of our shluchim with 100 of Josephus's senior people. Right? There was a message being sent, very clear. So he's asking these questions now, and he said, I used that money, the gold pieces, right, to pay for the travel of this group that was going back. Your envoys, your own envoys I was paying for. What became of that? I declare that these had been given as travel money to their envoys who had been sent to Jerusalem. At this, the group declared that I had not acted properly in giving the envoys payment from a public fund. You were financing this with public money? How dare you? What kind of person are you? Now the mob became agitated at these words because they perceived the wretchedness of these people who were questioning me. I realized that a riot was about to be ignited. Wanting to arouse the anger of the populace even more against these men, I said, but if I did not act correctly in giving payment to your envoys from the public fund, stop behaving angrily. I myself, personally, I shall pay back the 20 gold pieces. I'll personally fund the journey, right? Not out of public funds. Right? I'll pay back the envoys. When I had said these things, Iona's group fell silent, but the populace grew still more agitated against those who were so obviously demonstrating this unjust hostility towards me. So, what's happening? They're stalling, waiting for Jonathan of Gascala to arrive with his force. Right?
How big was his force?
We don't know. We don't know at this point. We just know a message was sent that he should come with his maximum force, well armed.
Is he aware of that? Was he aware of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. Was who aware?
Josephus.
It seems that he was. He's using their... Now, many of us would think, okay, he's stalling. I'm not going to let him stall. Let me get to the end of this, right? Mm-hmm. Get my weapons and face the guy. Josephus says, no, I know why you're stalling. Right? You're stalling because you want him to come. Right? I'm going to use this time to get the people of Tiberias, your time that you're creating, right? I'm going to use it against you. By the time this guy arrives, you're going to have a riot on your hands defending me from all the people of Tiberias. That's what's going to happen, right? So that's how he used their stalling time. When I had said these things, Iona's group fell silent, but the populace grew even more agitated against those who were so obviously demonstrating this unjust hostility to me. When he observed their transformation, Jesus directed the populace to withdraw, but requested the council wait there. For he said that it was impossible to conduct a careful examination of such actions with an uproar going on. As the populace were crying out that they would not leave me behind alone with them, someone came secretly to Jesus' group, reporting that John of Gascala was approaching with armed soldiers. It almost sounds like the story of Yaakov and Esav, the way he's telling it. But the group no longer restraining themselves, now with the group no longer restraining themselves, that is, delaying, but with God quickly providing for my safety, Had it not been for him, I might have been completely destroyed by Jonathan of Gascala, he said. Tiberian stopped this, and Jonathan said, Tiberian, stop this interrogation for the sake of 20 gold pieces. It is not because of these that Josephus deserves to die, but because he longed to be a tyrant, and when he had deceived the Galilean mobs with words, to seize the rule for himself. That was the accusation, because now they know Jonathan is at the door. All right? While he was saying these things, they suddenly laid their hands on me and kept trying to depose me. Right? These are the small group. Right? When those who were with me saw what was happening, they drew their swords and threatened to strike if they were forced to. While the populace picked up stones and were rushing to throw them at Jonathan and his friends, they snatched me from the violence of my enemies. When I had proceeded a little, I was about to run into Jonathan of Gascala's advancing armed soldiers. I anxiously moved away to avoid him, and was safely conducted to the lake, the Galilee, to the lake through a certain alley. I took a boat, embarked to Tarichia, that's where his major force was ferried across, and thus unexpectedly escaped the danger. Right away, I summoned the leading men, the Galileans, and indicated how, after suffering a breach of faith by Jonathan's group and the Tiberians, I had very nearly been destroyed by them. The mob of Galileans became enraged at these things and kept appealing to me to delay no longer in joining battle against them, but to authorize them to come upon Jonathan's group and to obliterate them, both him and Iona's group. Yet I kept holding, that is to say, now destroy Jonathan of Gagala and the Jerusalemite force at the same time. Just, we'll come and we'll destroy them, they'll never be heard from again. Yet I kept holding them back, despite their becoming thus enraged, directing them to wait patiently until we should learn what those who had been sent by them to the city of the Jerusalemites should report, saying, before we react, let's see what the people of Jerusalem say, right, about the people that are now in Tiberias. Right? For I declared that the appropriate course was for them to act in accord with that opinion, the one of Jerusalem, of those men that we had sent. In saying these things, I was persuasive. At that point, also, Jonathan decamped to Gascala. They returned, right? Having failed to realize his goal of an ambush. Right? And he chooses the word ambush very, very carefully, right? Because that is exactly what was planned against him, was an ambush. But in fact, he turned everything on its head, right? And the ambush was their ambush. You know, that they all, found themselves at the mercy of a mob, right? He was taken away quietly by boat to his forces that were waiting for him, and not only his forces, but really the men of the Galilee, had rallied to him, and rather than march on Tiberias and start killing other Jews, he said, now we're in a good spot, let's pause and see what comes back from Jerusalem. He knew full well what was going to come back from Jerusalem.
We didn't have a chance to survive Romans.
Absolutely, this is exactly what I'm thinking about.
All these brains, everybody, so busy digging into each other, digging graves for each other.
How many sects were arguing with each other in those cities? Remember you were saying...
Here is nobody even
I forget what the number was.
Going back to where you started, because I don't know your previous lecture or this part of the history, but if they knew that there was 1,000 Romans, the force was 1,000 Romans, and they were 8,000 Romans.
Why didn't they destroy
8,000 Jews.
8,000 Jews.
Right.
And they were actually the Romans were in 4 camps, and he could only be in 1 camp. What is not logical to me right now is that still, if he could have divided his force, if they were in 4 camps as 250 Roman men, he would have divided his force. There would still be the same proportion, 8-1.
So a couple of things. First of all, the Romans were only in 1 camp. His enemies had forged letters
that they were
saying
in 4 camps.
that they were in 4
Okay,
camps.
so
right?
he took it as a fact.
No, what he wanted to do. No, he knew that wasn't a fact.
No, he knew it wasn't a fact, but he was just.
He wanted to disperse them.
He wanted to disperse them, utilizing them.
Right.
But that, in my opinion, it doesn't seem logical that would have been a proper excuse, or they would have accepted that excuse, because if they believed that the Romans only had 4 camps of 250, assuming it was equal, still the 8,000, the proportion, could have attacked 4 camps, only Josephus's forces.
No, what Josephus was saying was, we need leaders. I can only attack 1 camp.
Exactly.
I'm 1 general. Right.
So he would have had other generals.
The others, you're all leaders, distinguished men, leaders, right? At this point, right? Each of you should go and attack one of the other camps.
One of the other camps.
Now they knew. The people who had written these letters knew there was nobody
there was only
there.
1 camp. So they didn't want to go out to attack.
Right. Yeah.
However, they wanted Josephus to go to attack.
And Josephus did go. He went to one of them. Right?
Yeah, but he
himself and his force went back. No. There's two separate things, right?
2 separate things.
When
so
he came back, he did attack. And when he came back, he said, I'm going to attack again. You got more letters that describe it? I'm going to go again. But I can only go to one place.
To one place.
Right? You have to each go to
the other 3 places, fictitious
4 places. The fictitious places that you've created. Right? Now go take your armies and fight there.
Because the people were watching.
They were embarrassed into doing it because it was their own documentation.
Yes, but why wouldn't they have gone, knowing that
they did go?
They did go.
They did go, right? And they were embarrassed by it, and they had wasted their time. You know, everybody saddled up and went, and there was nobody there.
So why would the mob have turned against them?
Because obviously they weren't telling the truth.
So in other words, the mob realized that there was...
The mob realized that they were picking on Josephus, as Josephus writes this. Now, there's a couple of things you have to remember always.
He was the...
when they switched sides.
He was almost like the king of Galil. So they couldn't
he was a governor.
What they wanted to do was get the general population to turn on him, but they couldn't because they were so loyal to him. No matter what they did, they couldn't get him.
And the Roman force that was there was a non-factor. In fact, Josephus they'd been toying with each other for, it seems like months, where they'd have skirmishes, but nothing real, because it wasn't a significant Roman force. They didn't want to engage Josephus. And Josephus, we come to understand, very early on, believes that Israel cannot win a war against Rome, and that Israel will be destroyed by Rome. And so his leanings are to try to find a diplomatic solution rather than to engage them in a war that will destroy the country. You know, what his role was in the destruction of the country is a legitimate question, obviously. You know, he spent his life in comfort in Rome afterwards. At the same time, it seems that there's a big argument that he was right. Now, part of when we come back to this, and I guess we almost come back to this at the end of every week, is the point that was made that they could never have beaten Rome if they were so willing to fight with each other, so willing to expend energy, brilliance, tactics, resources to struggle with each other, while Rome sat and said, we don't have to do anything. Let's just let the Jews kill each other, right? You know. Now this changed again. There was another rebellion that followed this, which was Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kokhba's, which was a devastating war for Rome because it was a united community. So I think that the lesson that comes from this experience is that unity is critical. And I want to close with a thought that since we're getting another chance, we have Israel back, right? And this is a good time for Jews who are not in Israel to show unity and to gather together on November 29th at the Shari Shamayim Synagogue at 7 p.m.
Absolutely.
To enjoy some highlights of the film, The Awakening of Judea and Samaria, and to hear from the leaders of the movement that has resettled the cradle of Jewish civilization. So I strongly suggest you go there. Tickets will be available at the door.